So greetings from wherever or whenever you're listening, and welcome and thank you for once again turning into the Perspectives on Leadership podcast brought to you by Fire Engineering. My name is Steve Shaw, and I'm proud to be an assistant chief at Fort Lauderdale Fire Rescue. I'm also honored to be part of the Fire Engineering family as an author, as a presenter at FDIC, and as a host for this podcast. There are a ton of amazing podcasts out there, and I am truly honored that you're choosing to listen to this one. I continue to be a consummate student of leadership, and I'm grateful for this platform, for the value it provides those who listen, and for the opportunity it provides me to grow as a leader within Fort Lauderdale Fire Rescue. In the last conversation I had with Chief Halton, he mentioned how FDIC was a tactics conference, not just with firefighting, but with all things, leadership, training, mentorship, etc. And then no matter what we taught or presented on or spoke on, we should always be focused on the tactical ways for our listeners or readers to model or deploy these ideas in the real world. So in that spirit and in his honor, I will continue to focus on the tactics as well as the concepts. I continue to be fascinated by how our perspectives affect our ability to lead. Perspective is the lens through which we see through, but it can also be the lens that other people use to perceive their world. Call it what you will, mindset, viewpoint, angle. Perspective is a powerful toolbox in the toolbox of a leader. The goal for this podcast continues to be pretty straightforward, to take a concept or trait that we associate with leadership and take a deep dive down that rabbit hole. Our fire rescue service is filled with amazing leaders and each have their own perspective on leadership. I want to pick their brains and allow them to provide as many tactical, immediately deployable takeaways as possible to the listener. I'm forever grateful to Fire Engineering and Chief Halton for allowing me to have this platform so that I could do my part in passing it on to my brothers and sisters in the fire service. So I met Jess Rodzinka, and I first met, I want to say, close to a decade ago at the Fort Lauderdale Fire Expo. Since then, we've been traveling in similar circles and in terms of training and conferences and such. A few months back, I saw that Jess was teaching a class titled The Senior Man. And just the title alone had me stepping back and reflecting on all those senior firefighters, drivers, medics, EMTs, officers who had shaped my career early on. And I started thinking about the senior firefighters who chose not to promote because they loved what they did and were happy with their team or firehouse that had been built. And I remember thinking, thank God that these people didn't promote, so I had the chance to work with them and get to learn from them through all those years. But then I keep diving deeper. I thought about, what does it mean to be the senior man? How is that defined? Who determines when that person has reached that status? And of course, I'm not talking about gender. I'm talking about that senior, respected member of the firehouse, those that have paid their dues, earned that immense amount of respect all around, and that person that people go to seek knowledge, wisdom, or more specifically, the why in what we do things. And then I thought more about words and conversations that I've had with senior members throughout my career. And that was a good reflection. Some of the greatest moments of my career were simple conversations that had stopped me in my tracks. Those that made me feel great and those that pretty much honestly gave me a firm reset when I needed it. And I remember the weight of those words and the individuals in my life and how much I needed to hear them from those senior folk. Then diving even deeper beyond words into actions, I started remembering all the examples that have been set by so many of the senior members, whether it was the care and maintenance of tools and equipment, or those that made sure the firehouse was taken care of as it was their own. And some of these examples, they were so basic or so simple, but that's the point. These quote unquote simple examples were nowhere near simple. They were life-changing, massively impactful examples to all around us. They were textbook examples of integrity. In other words, the actions matched the words they were using, and that was powerful. So all that said, I'm really looking forward to get Jess's thoughts on all this as we talk more about this concept of the senior man. Brief introduction for Jess. Jess is a 28-year veteran of the fire service and serves as a captain for the Charlottesville Fire Department in Charlottesville, Virginia. He's currently assigned to Engine 5, and his previously assignments have concluded Truck Company 9 and Tower 10. Jess previously worked for Staunton Fire Rescue for 11 years, where he was assigned to Truck 1 and Engine 2. He holds certifications in Virginia as an Officer 4 and an Instructor 3. He is a constant student of the craft and teaches up and down the East Coast, presenting on truck company operations as well as forcible entry and Virginia truck schools. He's a cadre for the 350 line and fill-the-box training, along with making the stretch. And he's taught at multiple conferences such as Fort Lauderdale Fire Expo, the Andy Fredericks Training Days, Wichita Hot, Carolina Finder Days, Tailboard to Trenches, and the Rockingham Regional School. So before I give it to Jess real fast, I want to just mention three things that I thought of as we were kind of getting ready for this conversation. on the senior firefighter. And that was the first thing I thought of was, the idea of promote or not to promote. And as I started thinking about this, I started thinking about the ideas that I first been pushed years ago to promote and take every test that was available to me. And then years later thinking, that may not have been such a good idea. So I'd like to kind of sit there and talk about what that looks like and kind of unpack the idea of when and why to promote. Second thing I think of was expectations. When we think about the senior man, the senior firefighter, what are our expectations of that senior firefighter? But on the same term, what are their expectations of us? And I really like to talk about that as well. And the third thing I thought about is that, and this is something we talked about before we started talking, was the idea that senior is definitely a relative term. Jess and I spoke prior to sitting down, and we discussed a multitude of department dynamics that could put people in positions of being that senior member way before they expected, based on a variety of things like explosive growth and so on and so forth. So I'm really looking forward to diving into those concepts as well. So that being said, Jess, thank you for joining me today. I'm excited to have you on, man.
Thanks for having me. It's a great seeing you, and I'm looking forward to this opportunity to talk with you today and see what we can figure out.
Yeah, man. Same here, bro. So let me dive into it. I know that today you're working a Mando, so I want to make sure I value your time and make sure we get through this just in case. But
good.
I wanted to just, like I said, when we first started talking a while back, and then later on seeing that concept of the class you were teaching, the senior man, it just brought a lot to my head, and I really wanted to dive into there. So let me start with this. In terms of all of us having a certain passion for the job, give us a snapshot of who you are, and then what spurred the idea to focus on this concept of the senior man.
Absolutely. So I'm a generational fireman. My dad was a fireman and his uncle was a fireman as well. Dad was a firefighter in Augusta County, in the county I live in, where I started volunteering. So I was able to learn and be around a firehouse and a lot of old traditions the fire service held, and that was carried on. I remember sitting around the firehouse when I was a kid and listening to the guys talk, and then you turn around, they're all talking. You hear them say, "Oh, you'll soon get there." And then you turn around, you're like, no, I'm never going to get there. And then all of a sudden they look around, and like you and I were talking the other day, turn around, I was 28 years. I put that down before I sent my resume in, and I was like, holy hell, it's been 28 years in a blink of an eye. So I came from Augusta County, a small community. It's since grown. It's becoming a bedroom community to a lot of larger cities around us. But it's a bedroom community. They're getting busier over there, but it's a pretty cool place. I was able to volunteer at a firehouse that had an engine, a ladder, and a rescue there. So I was able to cross-train with all different facets of the fire service. And then growing up, watching the work ethic my dad had, I just kind of carried that on. So as I move forward, that's kind of one of those things. I've always wanted to be a firefighter and progress through that field. And then eventually got hired in 1998. And then here I am now, finally got promoted. And I'm at Charlottesville. I've been here right now 15 years, and we have a good time here and enjoying it. So that's a little bit about me, and the concept of the senior man is where we're getting ready to roll. So I'm excited to see where we head with these conversations, because they're had everywhere.
100%. In fact, no, I'm glad you thank you for the intro. In terms of like that senior firefighter, like I said before, I found myself thinking about all those members when I first started that it kind of were those senior members of the department, and that I learned a lot from in the beginning. And for me, I was a hazmat guy. So I got to spend time with the hazmat team back in the day. So fortunately for me, those hazmat members were senior hazmat technicians throughout the department, and having a chance to kind of sit there and learn from them and watch them and talk with them and just be a part of a team. They've really truly taught me what being a team member was. Before then, it was more individualistic, trying to just make sure I was getting promoted and I was getting my classes, I. But sitting with these folk, it really just, they taught me what a team was. And I needed that early on in my career. So, what are your examples? In other words, when you think about the class you put together, what are some of your examples that pull you in to drive you to teach this?
So one thing we clarify when we start the class, and I try to clarify, is I bring up this example from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, not the new Willy Wonka, but the old with Gene Wilder and Grandpa Joe, Grandpa Josephine, and Grandpa George and Grandpa Georgina. They're sitting in the bed, and I talk about Grandpa Joe, how he had been sitting in the bed forever, how long, and then all of a sudden his grandson came in with the golden ticket, and he was able to hop up and do stuff. But why he wasn't able to help, his grandson and his mom, provide for the family because they're obviously poor. If you know Charlotte and Chocolate Factory, he was there for a long time. We're not talking about the guy that's been here for 25, 30 years. That's a bump on the log that all of a sudden, well, I'm going to promote for X or I'm going to promote for Y. No, the senior guy is somebody in the fire service, in your firehouse, in your fire department, in your engine company, the truck company, or whatever, that is senior to you, that you look up, respect to, that you see going forward. So the senior guy may not be the senior guy in the firehouse. It may be an 8-year guy or a 4-year guy that's really motivated, that's taking training, that's doing stuff in the firehouse to push the firehouse to get better, to push your engine company or truck company or rescue company or whatever you're assigned to, your fire department, to push it to be better to the next level. That's what we're talking about. And for my career up to the last few years, I was pushing forward to be a chief officer, and I was taking classes, educating myself, formal education, fire service training, anything I could get my hands on to ride that right front seat, eventually promote to a battalion chief buggy, et cetera, maybe even higher than that. However, when it hit me was a few years ago, right around the end or the beginning of 2019, we had lost our senior guy to job-related cancer, and all the information he had was gone. So early 2019, we were sitting at the firehouse. I not only was the most tenured guy in the department for that day, but the most tenured guy on the job for that day. And I held no rank. I was still just a firefighter driving the ladder truck, which was my job all the time. And when everybody started looking at me, I was like, holy shit, I'm the guy that needs all the answers. Not only were the people looking from the bottom up, but the top, the battalion chief, the captains were looking down at me to kind of facilitate and assist to get things done. And this whole time I've been studying and taking classes on how to be an officer. But if you start taking a step back, there were really no education or classes to be like this middle management, this informal leader. Like, it's okay to be that. And there was no classes that anybody talked about it. And as I progressed through and started writing stuff down and talking to other senior guys from other departments throughout the country as I traveled, I started taking information down. I was like, this is somebody that not only struggles that I'm having, but it's struggles through other departments that guys are having. Like, they turn around and they look like, holy crap, I just started this job 15 years ago and went through the same conversation we're having. It went through in a blink of an eye. And now everybody's looking at me all of a sudden as the senior guy, like the man with all the answers. Where the new mop heads at? Where are the new mop handles at? Simple things like that you kind of need to know in the firehouse that no one else does. And our department is relatively young. We went from a very senior department, and like a lot of departments throughout the country, we're hiring a lot more people, and their experience level in the fire service as well as life experience is not there so much. They're great people. They're becoming good workers. You have to teach them all that, but that wasn't there. And these guys, you look at departments that are starting from new in some aspects, that they have no concept of the senior firefighter. So we go lecture about it. We talk about some thoughts and philosophies. We learn from good leaders that we've had. We learn from bad leaders. A lot of the stuff I've picked up, and I myself, being a leader now, both informal and now formal leader, a lot of my traits I pick up from the bad leadership. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be like that person. I don't want to be like that lieutenant, captain, chief officer. So I've learned a lot more sometimes from the bad leaders than I do good leaders. So like I said, you turn around and you're like, oh my gosh. And all this is kind of coming together at one time for some people, and having this conversation, very candid conversation we do in the class, a lot of questions come around, a lot of feedback on what to do and how things have been done in the past.
You opened this up in a beautiful way. There's a lot to break down here. And some of the things I already wrote down was the fact that, that person may be the senior person and is not defined in the years in the job, but what they bring to the table, their actions, their knowledge base, that institutional knowledge, that knowing where the bodies are buried, all that comes into play. So it's definitely not in terms of years. And I think that's one of the biggest caveats is it's an action. It's more powerful than a number. And you also mentioned, and it's unfortunate to hear about the loss of the senior person you were talking about. It also reminds us, a very stern reminder, that you have these individuals that work with you that have this immense knowledge, this respect, this this immense amount of institutional just experience, and you got to get with them. You got to ask them questions. You got to have the conversations. You have to be intentional about having those conversations. So a lot of times, for whatever reason, those individuals may not come to you all the time, but they're there. So it's kind of like the both sides. And we talked briefly about the wanting to talk about expectations. In terms of the expectations, you want those people to find a way to get that and transfer it to other people. But at the same time, the expectation is on us too, to get and get that information out of those people, ask them questions, have the conversations, learn from them. So it's a two-way street, but there's there's so much of that knowledge that is there. How do you harness it? And you also mentioned the word informal leader, and obviously that's a topic of this discussion is, some people promote and are given certain tasks and responsibilities by rank alone or position alone. These individuals we're talking about become the informal leaders over time based on just what we talked about, just whether it's the relationships or their experience. And that's a huge part of our job. And the fact that you mentioned the comment about the person with all the answers, the person that understands where, when, why we do certain things. They know where this SOP came from. They know why this culture that is there. And these people these are some of the examples we talked about. So in terms of that, what do we need to be promoting or advocating in terms for our senior members? In other words, the need to demonstrate a practice. What do we need to be constantly having conversations about, not only for those individuals that are there, but for the ones that are going to be taken on that role? What are your thoughts on that?
So the one thing you brought up earlier was your why. You need to figure out why you're here. Are you here for a paycheck? Are you here for whatever? But whatever you're here for, you need to figure out your why. And after you figure that out, you need to realize that we're just at the bottom. At the end of the day, we're a number. Unfortunately, I hate to say it as much as I'm an advocate for a solid fireman, a solid firefighter, all around. We're a number. We're going to retire. We're going to quit our job. We're going to do something, whatever. And then the next person's going to come in. The bell's going to go off. Door's going to go up, and a fire truck's going to go out the door. And it's that cycle's never going to end. So I want to leave a legacy of sharing information. I've been very fortunate and blessed to be able the opportunities that I've had, and I get a lot of information from traveling and teaching and talking to people and having interactions and conversations with people that I want to pass that on. So having that integrity to pass information on and not be a selfish person, but to be a selfless person and pass information on. It may be as simple as we talk about in class. I bring up, and he knows I talk about him. I bring up a story about one of the junior firefighters. He's very young. He's it's been a few years now, but he was young when he came to us. In academy, he was 19. When he came down to the floor, someone was like, "Hey man, it's your turn to make the tea." So we hadn't seen this gentleman for some time. I go up and check on him, and this was prior to me getting promoted. I go up and check on him, and he's in the kitchen. He has in one hand he has a pot, in the other hand he has a box of tea, and the water's running in the sink. And I said, "Hey man, you all right?" He goes, "Well, to be honest with you, no, I'm not okay." And I was like, "Okay, what's going on?" He goes, "To be honest with you, I don't know how to boil water." I was like, "Okay." So I said, "So you have to take a step back," and we all come from different backgrounds. And this was kind of one of the realization that I had to figure out where this kid came from. So I took a step back and said, "Hey man, so why don't you know how to boil water?" He goes, "Why, I still live with my parents." And he's 19. So it's understandable. He goes, "I still live with my parents, and I just don't know, like my mom and dad have always done things for me. I haven't had to do anything." So then that opened up a plethora of stuff of like, he really didn't know, but we didn't know he didn't know that until he admitted it. So we talk about integrity, but you have to be willing to have that selflessness and accept and be humble and have the empathy of where people have come from their background. He didn't know how to boil water. So for the next day, we taught him how to boil water, make toast, and make simple meals. So since then, now it's like, hey, we come in and we'll look at a new recruit firefighter that's on the floor, and the dumb question is like, what do you know how to make and what do you not know how to make? Like, we need to show you this. So then it's a step-by-step process on how you show it. So then as we do that step-by-step process, we're setting expectations for them, like, hey, this needs to be done this particular way. It's a Southern thing. They like sweet tea around here, so this tea has to be made every day. So the sweet tea is made, but it's done a particular way per shift. But as we're doing that, we're opening ourselves up to being vulnerable. We're showing our empathy. We are setting our expectations. So we're kind of knocking down 3 goals at one time as we grow. It's also allowing us, when we're showing our vulnerability and our empathy with our communication is open, and now you're building a trust between the senior person and the junior person. So now that trust can go back and forth. Now it becomes a two-way street. And it's like, hey, if he has a problem, he or she has a problem, they could come to you and realize that anything, any type of problem, from a life problem to a work problem, they'll come to you, and you're building that trust. And now as you build that trust, now you kind of move things forward. As you can see, these small building blocks then build a great foundation. And then they start seeking out information on their own, because they're like, well, I didn't know how to boil water. There may be some other things I don't know how to do. And then that goes for you as well. As a senior guy, I was like, all right, what else don't you know how to do? And it was like, well, I don't know how to mop. I don't know how to, you think about the mopping thing from the movie with Eddie Murphy, Coming to America. He's like, well, you know how to use that thing? Well, yeah, he puts it in the bucket and swings. So that's what I had pictured. And if we didn't show him, I'm sure that's what would have happened. But not that we know, but you had to show people how to mop and how to clean bathrooms. Like, you're setting those expectations on how to be done. And you're also being very vulnerable and showing that empathy of like, well, why don't you understand this? I mean, come on, man, you're whatever, or what happened? And they open up and like, well, I've never had to do that before. And you're like, oh, I realize that. And you're like, okay, so let's show you how to do it.
So it's really good you started that, because imagine, I mean, with that scenario with the water, imagine if the crew or the company or the person just said to the kid or the new firefighter, well, what the hell, and just didn't give him the time of day, or, oh, I can't believe this kid doesn't know anything. Instead, this is an opportunity. This is a massive opportunity. Not only is it a responsibility, it's an opportunity. And we had this conversation a lot with, I've had either on a previous podcast or something else, where we had the same conversation about what these new firefighters are coming to the table with. And regardless if it's not much, or if they never started a chainsaw, or don't know how to mix fuel, or don't know how to boil water or cook, that's not it shouldn't be a challenge. It should be an opportunity. Now you have the opportunity to be the person that takes them aside and teaches them whatever the gap is. Not only are they going to learn it the right way from you if you do it the right way, but two, they're going to look at you as that mentor, that senior person, that guide in the fire service. And not only for the fire service, but in life in general. And I think that the key point of what you just said was, it opens up the door to other opportunities. If it's not just the water, it's what else don't they know that they may need some guidance on. This is an opportunity, I mean, of massive proportions. And we have the ability to be the leaders in that space. And it's frustrating sometimes when you have some of the firefighters of the firehouse who see that as a negative. Like, oh, I can't believe this guy doesn't know this. Dude, that's an opportunity. Yep. Take the opportunity.
And so the other, sorry to interrupt, but the other thing I found is that he wasn't the only one that didn't know how to boil water. There were other people that didn't know how to boil water, but they were just too afraid to step up. So you sit there and look like, well, I may not know how to start a chainsaw, but I'm not going to be the one because that's like, some people look at it as like you're chumming the water for a bunch of sharks. I may not know how to start a chainsaw, but there may be 3 or 4 other people that don't know how to start a chainsaw. Not because they don't know how to do it because they're dumb. No, they've never had the opportunity or need to start a chainsaw in their life. Mm-hmm. So it's also opened that door. It's like, if you show, well, if Bob is vulnerable enough to say, I don't know how to boil water, well, and I really don't know how to do laundry, I need to ask about that. So then, it kind of branches out, keeps going in that aspect that it's showing that the vulnerability to allow yourself to not know something, which in this field, as you know as well as I do, that we're all type A personalities. It's tough to admit that you don't know. I mean, how many conferences have we been at where it's like, oh, you don't know something, but it's actually a learning opportunity for everybody, not only the instructor, but the student, because then you pass on more information and you're just expanding that knowledge even more.
It goes back to what we're talking about here, that the senior person of the department, or whoever the senior member, the weight of their words and their actions are just powerful. And my first day on the job, for example, and we're talking about examples here. I remember the first day on the job I had as a firefighter paramedic with Fort Lauderdale. My lieutenant, Rich Pearl, brought me to the side, sat me down, and just got to know me. And one of his questions was, what else do you do? And I'm thinking, what do you mean, what else do you do? I'm a firefighter and a paramedic. He goes, nah, man, what else do you do? And I didn't think about it until years later, the impact of that statement. What he was asking was, hey, I know you do more than firefighter and paramedicine. I know you have more to offer. I want to know what you do. So if we have a situation where I need to deploy something you know that I don't, I want to be able to do that. And
Right.
at the time, I didn't get it. And years later, I'm like, oh my God, that was mind blowing. The fact that here's a senior guy asking a brand new guy what else they bring to the table. And I remember thinking about that and then deploying that later on, not just assuming that the person coming in doesn't know shit or don't know nothing, but what else do they bring? They bring something. What else? And empower them to do that and empower them to speak up and offer what they have to offer. And I had that same experience with the hazmat guys in my first year. I would watch my lieutenant, Doug LaValle, interact with all these senior hazmat technicians on all these hazmat calls we were going on. And at the end of the day, Doug LaValle would make the decision, but in the meantime, because of the nature of the call, he was interacting with these senior members, asking them, what are your thoughts? What do you think? What do you senior guys bring to the table based on your experiences? And I watched this, and having that opportunity to watch this interaction and this empowerment to his crew and then build up to the decision, and then he make the decision. Oh my God, it was mind blowing. It was just so amazing to be a part of and to see. I'm glad I had that. And I wish more people had those experiences and the words and the conversations with these senior members to see what it looks like. So, yeah. And I think the last thing you said about this, and this is the most important part of that conversation, was the fact that those conversations, that integrity of offering, I don't know something, and then teaching them how, and then the further part of that is the building of the trust. In other words, now that you open the door, you're teaching them how to do something as simple as boil water, may lead to that trust where if they have something else going on in their life, whatever it is, you might be the one they come to.
Yeah.
And that's powerful. That's huge.
Yeah.
So one of the things I want to talk about is in terms of promotions. A lot of these senior members who happen to be firefighters or drivers or medics or whatever, they never seek to promote. That's a good thing because we have these senior members doing their job at an expert level that we get to learn from and capitalize on. What are your thoughts in terms of promotion, like when to do and why to do it and that kind of thing?
It's a great thing. We actually got in a conversation, a gentleman and I in another jurisdiction got in a conversation because he's at that point now where, like, I don't know if I want to promote yet. He's a good senior firefighter on his company. He does really well, but he's at that point now where he's making the decision, like, I don't know if I want the people that are eligible to promote with me leading me. So what should I do? And it's an excellent question all around. I mean, I was at a point I'd gotten passed over several times for promotion to where I'm at now, and I just accepted the fact that, hey, I'm just going to now own this senior firefighter position for the rest of my career, and I'm happy with that, and just trust the people, and then trust people that are promoting that they're going to do good by you, good by the department, good by the company. But as far as, like, if you want to promote or not, that's again, it goes all back to your why. What do you want to do in the fire service? Why are you here? Are you here to make it better? Are you here to are you here to make more money? Because promotion, that the fee, the cost of promoting and the bonuses you get with the promotion, the nominal fee, I guess that'd be okay to say, your pay raise you get with promoting, right? That's nice to have. And you keep going up. Now, is that your driving power, or are you in it? What are you in it for? Again, what is your why? And as an individual, you have to sit down and figure it out. Like I said earlier, I've taken classes and I aspire to be some type of chief, battalion chief, deputy chief, district chief, assistant chief, fire chief, whatever it is. I have since realized that because of the bureaucracy and some of the stuff that's going on, I think I'm pretty good right now where I'm sitting. I can affect change in my company. I can affect change on my shift. Granted, I still have that umbrella of leadership over me, but I now have a good foothold to at least make my point and make my opinion known, as long as it's done professionally. And with that being said, that I can, try to push things forward. Now, am I going to get aggravated that things only go to a certain level because it's not in the same mission and values that my battalion chief or deputy chief have? Absolutely, 100% of the time. But there's things you can control and things you can't. What can we control? We come in every day. Your attitude, your performance, your motivation every day can always be changed. Your missions and goals is your own personal reflex. So you've got to figure that out, what you want to do. If you feel that you can promote and make efficient and effective changes in your firehouse, your fire company, your department, whatever it may be, do that. But do it for yourself and not for anybody else. You need to look and figure out your why. And if you're doing it for yourself to make things better, 100%, I'll support you. If you're doing it for financial gain, that's your own motivation. That's not my motivation. I didn't join the fire service to be a millionaire and have a yacht sitting in the Atlantic Ocean anywhere. I knew that wasn't going to happen. But my motivation and my why every day is for that next generation. We have a lot of great people in this department. They're don't get me wrong, they're very young people. However, we have a lot of great people, and my mission is to make them better at what they do, because I don't want to. I've sat in a couple line of duty death funerals. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be there for them. I want to make sure my knowledge, my experience, everything I learned can get passed on to the next group, so they can keep passing it on. Hopefully, they can take that basket of knowledge and keep passing that knowledge on, add to it, and keep moving it down the line. Wherever you feel like you can do that, that's where you can do it. Do you feel like you can do it as a senior firefighter? Do it. As a captain, lieutenant, absolutely. As a chief officer, do it. But it has to be your why. Like, you can't really, your reason for promoting to your position, Steve, is your personal reason. It may not be my personal reasons, but again, my personal reason for not promoting may not be your personal reason. So each individual, but you have to look inside and at your department. What's good for you? What's good for your department? What's good for your family? That's the bottom line.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we're talking about this, because I think that in terms of people that are listening to this, the idea of promoting is always something that comes up. When do you do it? Why do you do it? So on and so forth. Like for me, I was always taught at a young age, Steve, if there's a test, take it. And I listen, I love my father. The wisdom I got from my father was immense. But that's one thing that I really wish I would have kind of thought a little bit further on. I wish I would have spent more time as a firefighter, more time as a driver. The smartest thing I ever did in terms of promotions was not taking the first battalion chief's test that was ever available to me. And by not doing that, I sat in the seat of an officer much longer, had my own crew, my own station. We had our own experiences, our own shared experience that grew us as a team. And even now, as an assistant chief, I look back on that and I just smile, because I had that experience of just, relaxing, waiting, learning, not rushing things.
Yep.
So I'm glad you talked about, we're talking about this. So for those that are listening, I'm glad you brought up the why. Why are you promoting? Not just, I'm going to take a test, but why are you doing it? Are you ready to do it? And that's a personal question, like you said. So I'm glad that we're talking about that, because it always comes up. Some of the firefighters I met when I first came on, because I was still thinking of this promotion mentality, I remember going to some of the firefighters and I'm like, why aren't you promoting? I don't understand. Why aren't you taking a test? And they would stare at me and go, Steve, I'm good. I'm fine. I like what I do. I'm good at what I do. And this is where I belong. And I didn't get that when I first started. Now looking back, thank God they decided that and made that decision, because they became the go-to people that, like we've been talking about, knew their job, knew the ins and outs, knew the why, knew everything from where to keep the mop heads to how to make the coffee to what this person did when he was 20 years ago in the service, why we have this SOP, why this road looks like this, why everything. Thank God they did that. And I wish more of our people would just take a moment to think about what you said, the why in terms of promoting. That's huge.
That's a big thing. And again, and even now we're going to be going through, I believe they just said yesterday, it was yesterday, came up in the morning meeting, that the promotions are going to happen later on in the year. We usually try to do the promotional test October, November-ish area to try to get everything done and promote for the next year if we need it, if we have some openings. But again, we sit there like, well, who's promoting? And I look around and a couple people raise their hand, and then you go ask them well, proud of you. I'll help you, whatever you need. What can I help you do? But why are we doing this? Like, you're really good at what you do. Are you feeling pressured from doing it from home? Are you feeling pressured from work? Why are you doing it? Don't do it for the wrong reasons. Sure. And because then you're kind of stuck unless you demote yourself. That's where you're at. Now you're going to be you can be a good officer or leader or whatever it is, that's fine. Or you can be a shitty officer or leader. Mm-hmm. And it all comes back to that why.
Yeah. No, I'm glad we're talking about this. That's a good part of this conversation. And when we talk about formal versus informal leadership, that always is something that comes up with this talk. So I'm glad you dove into that. I also like that before we had this conversation, we were talking about the idea that, the term years doesn't really apply to this situation in terms of being the senior man or senior firefighter. And there's a lot of dynamics that happen within a department that puts people in those positions a lot sooner than they would have planned. And we were talking about some examples. And I know my department, if things go right in the next year and we get the grants we were looking for and whatnot and the right positions, we may have a combination of a lot more positions on the trucks, which we're praying for, and then a lot of retirements from the people that are already here, resulting in a massive shift in how much time people have on the job. Thus, the people that are there are going to be put in this quote unquote senior position much earlier than they thought that they would have been, considering the idea of years. And we talked about that. So I think that's a very profound conversation to have in terms of the relative nature of what constitutes being a senior person. Right. So let's talk about that for a second. What are your thoughts on that?
So throughout my career, I've experienced a lot of seniority as far as the older generation of firefighters, both when I was younger, a lot younger, starting to kind of really be able to hang around the firehouse more often with my dad, going down to the firehouse, knowing people and starting to get involved a little more. I've had a lot of experience, and it's been interesting. You sit back and kind of look at where I've come from and where people are at now, and you sit there like, oh man, I really haven't seen so-and-so. But you sit there and think like, wow, he was really not a good leader, but he was put in a position because he had seniority points on his test or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that's fine and all, which is great. You've been here for a very long time, wherever it may be, old jurisdictions, new jurisdictions, whatever. You've been here for a very long time, which is wonderful. You have a lot of tenure here. But just because you have a lot of tenure doesn't mean you deserve the respect that you are asking for or demanding, because you haven't shown or given the respect, the humility, the empathy to anybody else. You just kind of give that persona. And again, I've seen this throughout my 28-year career. And even before that, when I was in the firehouse with my dad, that just because they were there a long time, they had that persona of, give me respect because I am who I am. And that's one of the things that kind of hit home. I'm like, I'll give you the respect because you've been here a while and that you've earned your time here, but you're not going to have the respect of a senior person because, to be honest with you, you're kind of lazy. You show up 3 minutes before shift. You leave right as shift change, that things move forward. You don't really help around the firehouse. You're kind of like a blister, to be honest with you, when it's time to work or do anything else. A blister always shows up when the work's done. And you're demanding this. However, Johnny, who's been here 6 years, is the first one up, the first one kind of helping the new guys, the first one to do things, the first one in the fire truck, the first one to bring up training, the first one upstairs, the first one up in the morning, the last one up at night. That type of informal leader of like, hey, things need to get done because they need to get done. I'm doing the right thing because the right thing needs to be done. That kind of leadership carries a lot more. And when you see it, it's kind of a neat thing that happens. It's not necessarily, like we say, it's informal. The firehouse is really the one that tells you you're the senior man or firefighter. It's not looking at you and like, Steve, you're the senior guy. No, it's the firehouse tells you that you're the senior guy. They're the ones that start coming to you. Hey, if Betty needs something and she goes to Bobby and Bobby's like, well, you really need to ask so-and-so, he's going to have the answer for you. That's who you need to go to. And that person may be a 4-year guy, a 5-year guy, a 9-year guy, a 25-year guy. It depends on who that person is. And then if that person is a 9-year guy and they're starting to be looked at as a senior guy and everybody starts to come to him, he knows where to go to ask for help. All right. So I don't know this answer, but let's go find out and let's go ask Captain so-and-so or this guy. He's been here a while. He knows a little bit more than I do. The firehouse puts you in that position. You can't demand it. You can't ask for it. You're not appointed it. It's the firehouse that tells you, that kind of like lets you know that you're the senior guy. And that's, I think I answered your question in a roundabout way. But it's been interesting to watch and see that, but it's the firehouse that tells you the senior guy. I mean, if you've been on for 28 years, thanks. you're just really old. But if you've been on the form for 28 years and you're a contributing member to your shift, department, company, whatever it may be, absolutely, 100%. And take some of this away. One of my problems in my early on in my career, I was following the wrong crowd and kind of watching how crowds were being done. And I realized that I was, to be honest with you, to be frank, I was becoming an asshole. And somebody pulled me aside. It was a junior person. I was teaching a class, like, why are you such an ass? I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. And that kind of set me aside for a minute, put me down in my spot. And then I realized that I needed to be more humble and have more humility in myself for making mistakes and things like that. Having that humility in the fire service carries you a long way. And then as I started changing my attitude and how I delivered my conversations and tone with people, I started looking at myself internally and externally of like, holy cow, now I can really adjust who I actually am, and it can be more open. I mean, like, these guys here on my shift now are like, oh, if anyone's going to mess anything up, it'll be Rodzinka. Just give them 10 minutes. And here we go. We messed it up. And they're like, so we're not going to do it that way. Let's try it a different way. Perfect. So having that humility to own your mistakes and own things that are wrong and own things that you're doing wrong for yourself, for your department, carries that a lot. And that kind of feeds through your department, your company, whatever it may be, your shift mates and things like that. And they see that and they keep adding those things to it of like, wow, look at how he's realized this and changed his attitude and leadership styles. So
I'm glad you went there, because what I took from that is someone came to you and said something to you and it impacted you. In other words, someone chose to come up to you and say, hey, you're doing this right or wrong, but they had a crucial conversation with you that you basically had a reset with.
Yep.
I think that right there hit a bunch of nerves with me. I can remember just so many just influential times where the senior driver or firefighter or somebody with influence had a talk with me that gave me that reset. I was on an extrication one day years ago. I was, I guess, a new driver, and I'm on the engine, and the squad and some other units showed up. At one point, as a driver, I found myself inside the vehicle, using tools, ripping things apart, helping get the patient out. And at the end of the day, we all got the patient out. We're all high-fiving and all that kind of jazz. After the call was over, the senior driver on the squad came up to me and goes, hey, I'm mad at you. I'm like, excuse me? I was doing it, man. I was doing it, Steven. Yeah. I was in there. I was doing it. And he goes, no, I'm mad at you because you weren't doing your job. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, you're a driver. Your job is the apparatus, setting up tools and equipment, making sure everything is prepared, making sure the people that are in there, the officers, the firefighters, all the worker bees, have what they need to do, and you didn't do it. Nothing was set up. Everything was scattered. You weren't doing your job. And the first instinct was to fight with the guy. But about 2 seconds later, I looked at him and I'm like, you know what? You're right. I got nothing. But right after that, it changed me like that. I'm like, holy crap, he's right. As much as I don't want to admit he's right, and it changed the way I operated as a driver. I made sure I was just hyper attentive to my role. But it took that person to say, hey, Steve, you're doing it wrong. I'm mad at you. Click, done. But it was an example of that senior person taking me to the side and giving me a reset. And how often those words that those senior members use are just massively, massively impactful. And those are just words. And I think about actions too. Years ago, and I know you and I both present a lot. One of the stories I often tell is, this must be close to 20 years ago now. One of our firefighters on the hazmat team passed away years ago in a tragic airboat accident. And he was a pretty tight member of our team. And the day we set up for his funeral and burial was a long, long day. The whole hazmat team was draping the trucks, and from sun up till sundown, we were driving to the site. It was an emotional day, the presentations, the whole 9 yards. At the end of the day, on the truck that day was myself, Doug LaValle, the lieutenant, Carl Wright, who was a senior firefighter at the time, and I was kind of a firefighter driver at the time, and then a float driver who will not be named. At the end of the day, we're done. We're emotionally just stripped. We're just done. We're just ready to go back. So the officer, Doug, looks to the crew and goes, guys, we're going to head back to the firehouse now. The driver, doesn't matter who, if it was a float driver, looks at him and very loudly was like, we're not leaving. We're staying here all night. We're going to stay here at this ceremony, this party. We're going to stay here all night. We're not leaving anywhere. We're staying here, Doug. And the lieutenant goes, we are leaving. and the crew head back to the truck. The driver was just pissing and moaning and being a real jerk, to be quite honest. We get to the truck and we're heading back, and the whole way back, the driver's just mouthing off, really unprofessional. And Doug in the front is just quiet as a church mouse, just professional, quiet. And I'm in the back with Carl going, this is weird. This is really weird. We get back to the firehouse, pull into the bay, and Doug gets out of the truck and goes into the station. I'm sitting with Carl in the back, and the driver turns around to us and starts mouthing off. Like, can you believe that? This guy, blah, 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 blah. And Carl, who I deeply respect and who was probably one of the funniest people I've ever met in the fire service, Carl did what a senior member should have done. Carl, right there and then, lit this driver up, lit this cat up like I've never seen in my entire life. And I've never seen somebody actually physically shrink before. This driver physically shrunk.
Wow.
Carl lit this cat up. Don't you ever do that to your lieutenant. That is your lieutenant. And it just went through this rant for a good few minutes. And I felt, that meme with Michael Jackson eating the popcorn in the movie theater? I felt like that. Like I'm just watching this take place. But what I was watching was so impactful to my career. I'm watching the senior firefighter. The lieutenant walked away, didn't say a thing, didn't need to say anything. The senior firefighter knew what needed to be said, took that driver to the side, laid into him like I've never seen before, and corrected the situation. And all I could think about when I'm watching this go down was, how do I get that?
Yeah.
How do I get and earn that amount of loyalty? That
right.
that loyalty that you don't need to say or do anything, but just happens. What do I need to do as an officer, as a leader, as someone in the fire service to get that loyalty that's being demonstrated right now? But again, it goes back to what you were talking about, the words, the actions. You can't pay for that. I mean, and watching that, I took so much away in terms of what does it mean to be loyal? What does it mean to be that senior respected member and doing what needs to be done when the time is needed to be there? It's a funny story. I'll talk to Carl every so often and remind him of that story. He doesn't even remember it. It's funny because I'm like, you remember that time that this happened? He's like, oh, did I do that? I'm like, you don't remember? Yeah. Because that was in his nature. It was who he was. He was just doing his normal thing. I was taking it as gospel and watching this go down. But it goes back to what you're saying. Those senior members bring a lot to the table, and their words, their actions are just massively powerful. And your example was a good one too, that because someone reached out to you and said something, it changed.
Yeah.
So going further with this, I know I don't even know what time we're coming up, 40, 50 minutes or so.
I'd say real quick, I had a notice. I don't know if we could edit that. I had a notice that said 5 minutes left in my meeting. I didn't.
Nah, we're good. We can keep going.
Okay. I didn't. I was like, oh shit. So sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, absolutely not. One thing that Chief Holton reminded me of, and I mentioned this in the beginning, was that, FDIC and fire engineering, we all talk about tactical takeaways, regardless of the content. So when we talk about the senior people in our organization, what are some tactical nuggets that we can do to encourage those actions to take place? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's a question that's asked after pretty much every lecture. I've had 2 or 3 people come up at the end of the lecture. Just like we talk, kind of nervous to ask the question, kind of nervous to come up and talk and say something. But they all come up and say, well, how do I do that? So it happens so many times. I added it into the presentation later on. And it's that, and you and I talked about this, it's that 1 degree of change. And if you have, and Steve, I meant to look it up, and I didn't think about it after we talked about it. I don't know if it's a poem or a writing, a something, but they talk about that 1 degree of change. And we talk about the 1 degree of change at 211 degrees. What's water doing? It's off, steaming. It's doing its thing. It's getting ready to boil. But from 211 to 212 degrees, it starts boiling and creating a lot more steam and it can be used as energy. And what can that steam do? And steam can move. We can move locomotives, mountains. We could haul a bunch of stuff. We could change the landscape of the environment that we're in. So when people come up and say, well, how do I do this? Tell me how. And I wish there was a roadmap. If we come into the fire service, and most departments do it, if you want to be a chief level officer, you have a roadmap to get there. I want to be into tech rescue. You have a roadmap to get there. I want to be a paramedic and eventually take over the EMS division. There's a roadmap to get there. There's no roadmap to effectively create change. So the best thing I took that poem or whatever it is, it's that statement, that 1 degree of change. I took it and I tell them, I'm like, be that 1 degree of change. It takes a while to get there, but small things will get you there to start making change. And I'd give an example. Our department a few years ago, morale was down. It was horrible. Everyone was kind of in the dumps, and myself and a group of other people went to just a lecture-based class. They were putting on, it was like a one or two time thing. They were putting it on. They had some good lecturers come in, and the guy lecturing, he was talking about bringing like that pride and ownership back into the firehouse. He was talking about that, and we were sitting there, and during a break, the other gentleman comes up and goes, "We should come up with a logo for our firehouse." I'm like, all right, well, I have a friend that's a graphic designer. So we sent him a couple ideas, and he sent like 7 or 8 different designs. So we were like, all right, well, how do we do this? So then we put it out on like a Survey Monkey or whatever to everybody assigned to the firehouse at that time. And the winning design was the one we went with. Like, here's your option to vote. And that's how we did. Then we started, then we made patches and stickers, and they're like, well, I'd really like that on a shirt. Oh, okay, we have shirts. Well, how about a mug? And it just kind of, and then that started showing morale. Then that morale carried on, and with like probation, we have orange shields on our helmets for probation. So when you get off probation and you're accepted into the firehouse as well, you get a patch, a coin, some stickers, and it kind of grows that morale. And then now you feel part of a group. And that 1 degree of change of the conversation of like, let's come up with a station logo. It took time to get where we're at now, which was, like I said, 7 or so years ago that we did this. It took time to get there, but you have to take that one step, that 1 degree of change. You don't need an elephant one big bite. You take small bites. Rome wasn't built in a day. We could do all the famous sayings. However, we're here. It's 1 degree takes it. It's going to take time to get there, but you keep pushing forward and keep finding. You may run into a roadblock. You may run into some hesitation or what have you, but you keep moving forward and keep progressing that with that 1 degree of change. You'll eventually get there, but it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. Some stuff will, but the stuff that really needs to be set in place to build that good foundation will take time to get there. So I would say the tactical takeaway from being a senior man is take your time. The change will happen. You just have to be willing to fight the fight.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there, because a lot of times we look at these things as just small and little things, but in reality, those small and little things are exponential. And whether you're reading like James Clear's book on atomic habits and talking about that 1% better every day, or this 1 degree of change, it's those little things that over time, not only, like you said, develop a culture, develop a trend, but they will build up, and they are exponential in nature. So that's huge. Going a little more broader perspective, and I ask this every time I do one of these, in terms of your perspective, in terms of leadership traits, what do you find yourself focusing on as some of the greatest leadership traits that we should be practicing or deploying or thinking about?
The big one that I've learned a lot is own your mistakes. We're human. Just because you have a couple bugles on your shirt doesn't make you any more of a human than the last person. One of the bad leaders I had in my career said they're not speaking trumpets, they're plungers, because the more bugles you have, the more shit you have to deal with, the more plunge action you have to use. So I take that, I'm like, all right, well that's a good thing, but they're speaking trumpets because we could speak louder. But when you're speaking louder, you're also going to make a lot of mistakes doing it, because honestly, I'm still growing as a leader, both an informal leader and a formal leader. So making mistakes every day is a part of life, but own them and admit to them. I'm very open with my company and my shift when I make a mistake. Recently, I missed a holiday. I thought I had the day off. I did not. And I was somewhere else and didn't show up for work, but immediately called the battalion chief. Was like, hey man, messed up. Here, he said, no worries. Thank you for being honest, coming at me. I came back. I got the write-up that I deserved, which I was expecting, which I did. And I took that write-up, walked into the kitchen, owned up to my company. Hey, this is what happened. Let's make sure we have our days down. So then we learn from it. Make sure all our days are down. So now as a company, we're checking each other. We're watching each other's backs. Hey, don't forget you have to work tomorrow. Don't forget you have a trade. Don't forget you're on holiday. Make sure we get our time put in our time clock system. So that owning that mistake now shows that we have accountability with each other on my company. And that is carried on to other companies in my firehouse. The engine company's now checking on the truck company. The truck company's checking on the engine company. The medics are getting checked on as far as like time on the medic units. A lot, the accountability is happening. So owning your mistakes is a big one. The second one I think is, as far as a leadership quality, is being humble. We all started with no knowledge of this job. Very few of us anymore are fortunate enough to have the institutional knowledge and generational knowledge of the fire service. And knowing that and having that with us, we're able to carry things on. But a lot of us are coming in not knowing anything about the fire service. Besides, we make a lot of noise going down the street. If it's on fire, we go inside and we cause a lot of damage because we look like a bunch of idiots running around tearing stuff up on a house. So you can ask anybody in the public these things, and that's what they think firefighters do. But they don't know that all the training that goes involved and things like that, they don't know that. So being humble and realize that you started somewhere, you don't know any knowledge either. And now look, you've got 2, 3, 4, whatever bugles. Have that humility, being humble that you started somewhere, and everybody starts somewhere. And we talked about it earlier. You don't know where they're coming from. Understand that.
Yep.
And then, empathy is always in there, compassion, and honesty, open communication. Just be honest with them. If this is going to suck, let's embrace the suck together. But be honest that it's going to suck. There's some of the worst conversations I had to go down to my company, like, we're getting ready to do something that's going to suck, is go tell them that we have to go do something that's going to suck. And currently I have an excellent group of individuals assigned to me. I came from an excellent group of individuals that were assigned to me, and very fortunate to get transferred to another shift at the start of the year and have an excellent group of individuals assigned to me again. And you want to talk about making sure you're on a small pedestal. These four guys make sure I'm on a small pedestal every day. They this podcast will be like, hey, just because you're on a podcast, man, don't forget we still wear you out every day. Absolutely. So having that, but I'm very humble about it. My humility to owning those mistakes and making mistakes. I love making mistakes because now we know, as not only individual, as a group, how not to do it in the future.
Yep. And
we all learn something from that. So humility, being humble, owning mistakes, honesty, and communication, I think are my 5 pillars that I look at for being a good leader, both an informal leader and a formal leader, for whoever's listening to this.
I like also that you gave the example. Not only you mentioned like owning your mistakes and being humble, but you gave a really good example that pretty much set the tone at the firehouse. It's one thing to say something, but when you have those tangible examples to put in play what that actually looks like, that's huge. So we're kind of coming close to an hour here, but I wanted to ask one more question before we start wrapping it up. This is one of my favorite questions that I've asked a lot of people. It seems to be, it dives in a little bit deeper, but for you, what are your concerns in the fire service? In other words, what things keep you up at night?
Wow. The things that keep me up at night, besides the call load, am I doing enough for the new person? It's kind of I don't know if it's a good statement that I make, but my personal feeling is every day we make it through the day without killing somebody is another day closer that we have that possibility. So I wake up in the morning when I come to work, like, what are we going to do to make ourselves better and to make sure everybody goes home in the fire service? Because, everybody goes home thinking, well, the homeowner doesn't go home and things like that. No, I want to make sure everybody in my company, at my firehouse for the day, the next morning, we all go home. We may be banged up. We may be hurt. What can we do to make sure that doesn't happen again? So I focus on training. What do we need to do? we have so many new people in our department that it becomes kind of redundant sometimes to the older guys and to the senior guys here, and even some of the officers, that we're always pulling hand line. We're always doing the same evaluation because we have so many new people every day. So you have to pull a hand line, force a door, mask up, do that whole thing. That's done several times a day. But if you look at it like, okay, so we're training every day. It's okay to do that. Now let's throw some kinks in it this time to make it a little different. Let's throw some obstacles in the way. Let's put the engine out of position. Let's do something different to change the training so we have to think on our feet. Mm-hmm. So now we become more self-sufficient and more self-reliant on if we run into a situation. So that firefighter now can think for themselves, whatever it may be. So if you run into a weird stretch up a stairwell, blocked cars, fences, things like that, they can think for themselves and not just kind of stand there and go, oh, what do I do next? They're already 2 steps ahead. So what keeps me up at night is what can we do to make ourselves better each day and to make sure we all go home in a safe manner. If we we have a fire and it goes bad fast, how do we prevent those dominoes from falling? So that's what keeps me up at night. I wish, again, we've talked before. I'm very fortunate that I've had the opportunities to go teach all over. Coming down to Fort Lauderdale, I've learned so much. I take so much back every time I'm down there from you guys, both from the tactical leadership part and the operational side on how things are done, and even logistic side of things, because you guys do so much as far as that conference goes. Like the logistical stuff, you pick up small things like, oh, well, I never really thought about having that. So now when I go teach, I think about, that one little item that may be there. I could really use that next time. So seeing that and be able to pass stuff on and learn from all those things is where I want to go to make sure people do the right thing and go home every day. So I don't know if I lost track with that, but
no, you're, and that's it's a concern for a lot of us, especially with what we're being asked to do these days. We're through all hazards response. We do it all these days, and trying to, coming from a training background like we both do, when we try to match what we should be doing for training to prepare our people for every conceivable thing that we have to do. When you really think about it, that's daunting. That's scary. And all we could do is the best we can do, get the basics right. And you mentioned the basics of it, and then maybe tweaking the basics to challenge us. So it's focusing on the basics, challenging ourselves to make sure we're out of our comfort zone on a regular basis to prepare us for whatever could hit and whatever those tones will bring us. So it's a legit concern, and it's sobering as well.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, it is. And people. Well, I got this email or I got that email. We talked about earlier. There's things I can't control. I can't control what email comes down from the fire chief to my battalion chief to me. I can't control that. If that's what they want to do, that's fine. I have to follow that. I have to get my guys and girls to follow that as well in my company. Mm-hmm. Those are things I can't control. But like I said, what we can control is my attitude every day. Let's do some good training. Let's learn something today, even if it's walking around our district, something simple that day. Let's learn something to make us better, to make sure we go home. Oh, I didn't know that door was there, or I didn't know it exited here, something like that. So those are things I can control, and trying to help guys see that we can control those things. Now, do we have times that we can bitch and complain? Absolutely. I'll let them vent. And then I'll look at them like, are we done? Okay, so let's move on. We got stuff to do. Absolutely. You're allowed to do that. I'm allowed to do that. But again, bottom line, there's things I control, things I can't control. And I try to worry about the things that I can control every day. It's hard to do.
But you bring it back to where we started from the beginning. Those ideals that you're demonstrating, those things that you just mentioned, and those ability to take the situation and translate those messages from whoever, whether it be the chief or whatever, and then talk about it and translate the meaning why. These are all things that the senior member does, whether it's you as an officer, whether it's the senior firefighter at the firehouse, the senior medic on an ambulance, whatever it is. This is part of what we've been talking about the entire time. Yeah. So anyway, so I wanted to start wrapping this up. And I want to just kind of give as we kind of come back to the beginning, I go through this kind of the notes I've taken. We talked about a lot during this in terms of the senior firefighter, that senior person, that senior member of an organization. We talked about not being defined in years, but in actions. And we talked about the words, the weight of the words and the actions that those senior members take that are examples, shining examples of their role as a senior member. And also that senior title is not something that just happens. It's earned. It's bestowed upon them by the firehouse, by other people, because of what they bring to the table and those actions and those reasons why. And you mentioned why. We talked about knowing the why in terms of like if someone's talking about promotion, well, are you doing it? What are you doing it for? What is your why in terms of promoting? And it's not a bad thing to not promote. We have several members on the job, whether firefighters, drivers, whatever, that don't promote. And thank God they don't, because they are that respected, seasoned veteran that we all go to, whether it's institutional knowledge, the why things are done. There's a lot to boil down there. We talked about the relative nature of being a senior firefighter. In other words, based on your department dynamics, you might find yourself in that position way sooner than you thought because of, let's say, there's tremendous growth in the next few years and the department grows by 2 or 3 times. So you may find yourself in that seat of a senior member way before you traditionally thought you were going to be there. And then preparing yourself. How do we prepare? You mentioned a couple tactical ways to deploy that. Getting better 1% or 1 degree every day. And that trend, that growth, that slow growth is exponential, is powerful. It does take time, but the wins are there and will happen. You talked about things like owning mistakes and being humble. And those examples that those senior members set by doing those things are powerful. They're tangible, and they set the tone for all these new people that are coming on board that, and you kind of alluded to this, that just don't know about the fire service. They have never been indoctrinated to it. So these newer folk that are coming in, regardless of age, are looking for these examples. They're looking for, okay, you said consistency, you said integrity, you said leadership. What does that look like? And all these senior members, by deploying those and practicing those, not only saying the words, but practicing in action, are the examples that we're all craving and looking for. So this has been a lot. Of course, I took a bunch of notes like I usually do, man. I always end up taking a lot of notes, and there's a few things I'm walking away with from here, but I will tell you, one of the things I'm going to do as I walk away from this is I'm going to give gratitude. After this, I'm going to reach out to those individuals, some of the ones I mentioned on the show today, and just reach out and say thank you. I mean, I think about the impact that some of these senior members had on my career that are literally life-changing conversations and examples that I think they are due, just, if nothing else, me to just say thank you. And more pertinent to the job now, there are so many people that are on the job right now that I consider a senior member. Have I let them know? Have I voiced it, and have I made it clear that, hey, I considered you that senior person. You were the person I go to for information. You were the person I want speaking in front of the new guys, the new hires, my firehouse. Have I done my due diligence to let them know? Because maybe they don't know. And I think that's our responsibility to pass it on. So that's my homework for today, is to do that.
Yeah.
So thank you for unintentionally giving me homework.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Absolutely. Anything I could do.
So any final words in this concept? Any final things, thoughts as we go away from this, Mike?
No, I just appreciate, once again, the opportunity that you've given me to pass this on. I feel that this is something that needs to be talked about, because people are finding themselves in this position a lot sooner than they expected it to be in some cases. The way things that I've heard throughout the country, people, departments are starting from nothing, and they start from 6 or 8 dudes, male or female, and then all of a sudden they go from 6 or 8 dudes to 30 dudes to 50 dudes to whatever, and they keep growing. And then those people are looking around like, well, how do we get to where we're at, or where we need to be, where we come from, and people are realizing that, holy cow, I've got to be a leader, but I can't really be a leader, I feel, because I'm not a formal leader. Well, that's not true.
Right.
Everybody's a leader, no matter what, whether you raise your right hand to be that leader in a formal position or an informal leader. But just step up and have your why ready, have the integrity and all the things that we talked about to move forward and to do better for yourself and your company and your department every day. So, but again, I appreciate the opportunity to bring this up. It's a passion of mine that I hope to pass on to a lot of people, and we talk about. I look forward to keep sharing things, keep sharing this class. I think we're doing it. I'll be in October in Richmond, Virginia, for one of the Perfecting the Craft conference,
Awesome.
which is around I think October 11th it starts. And then before that, I'll be at Wichita, speaking at Wichita Hot again. They invited me back out. We had a good crowd last year, looking for a bigger crowd this year, and had a good time. Talk about leadership and informal leadership and the senior guy out there. So that's a good show out there if you ever get a chance to get to Wichita. They do a good job out there.
Awesome. And that was going to be my next question, is where are you going to be doing this next? So I'm glad you brought up those conferences. And there's so many phenomenal conferences around the country that people can hear, not only your words, but so many words from so many influential leaders right now. They're everywhere. It's awesome that there's so many opportunities now, and more than ever.
You can't scroll through any social media without hitting some type of conference on some week. If you really wanted to, I bet you could hit one every week of the year throughout the entire year, with the exception of Christmas and Thanksgiving.
You're not lying. You ain't lying. All right, man. Well, listen, thanks again once again for having this conversation. We broke down a lot, and I hope that the listeners here are walking away with some things, not only in terms of their experiences with the senior person, or if they are that senior person, but how to tactically get better at that role because of the needs we have in the fire service and the value those senior members bring. So I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping it up, but I want to thank everybody for tuning in once again. As I said before, I always thank Chief Holton and Fire Engineering and the Clarion staff for allowing us this platform. Thank you for allowing us to have this platform to talk about things that are instrumental to the fire service. This one definitely being one of them. Second Friday of every month, these drop. So I thank you for listening. I thank you for consuming this content. This was a great conversation. And Jess, thank you for being here. Thank you for chatting. This has been a phenomenal conversation, man.
It's always a pleasure talking to you. We have a good time. Thank you for allowing me to chat with you today and allowing me to talk through this.
All right, man. And if you ever need to reach out to Jess, he's available out there. How can they get a hold of you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
I'm on all the social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. If you want to, my email is always open as well. It's my name, Jess Rodzinka at iCloud.com. You can shoot me an email, ask me questions. I won't give you my phone number because my phone rings enough as it is, and I really don't like talking on it. So reach through that. But please reach out if you have any questions, comments, concerns. I'm willing to share whatever information I have with you. I don't want to keep anything to myself. I just want to pass it on to the next person. So whatever you guys want. So.
As do we all, man. As do we all. All right. Well, thank you, Jess, for being on the show today. Much appreciated. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next month. Have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Thank you.